again to our new series of Media Matters this year, where we invite people from industry to come in and give us their perspective on possible careers for yourselves and how their career has developed. Today we're very fortunate to have Haliza Hashim with us, and she works for Malaysian television, and I think you'll find it fascinating, her story. So please join me in welcoming Haliza.
Thank you for that introduction. Just I need to know who my audience are. All of you doing media studies? What year? Just briefly? First year, okay. Any of you want to be a journalist? A few, okay. A few years ago, just like you, I was a student too. I studied economics and at Cardiff University, and I didn't want to be a journalist either. See what happened. Right, correspondent, journalist, reporter, more or less the same, except correspondent is a job it's a job title for somebody who reports from overseas. So when you watch the BBC News or ITV and you see the correspondent there reporting on Donald Trump, for example, and that's a correspondent based in America for BBC. So I'm a correspondent for TV3 Malaysia based here, and I've been a correspondent for the same company for 25 years. So that's my journey from university. I was working in a TV station in Malaysia, and then I moved to the UK, to London, but I live actually in St. Albans in 1993. The job spec, you might have guessed, it can involve research. I do my own filming too these days, interviews, writing, presenting, and I report news from the UK and Europe. These are the various topics. Because my job is as a correspondent, there is no specific topic for me. I have to cover various stories, from fashion to politics to crime. In this slide, I'm just going to be showing you a lot of photos, and later on I will show the video and of just a variety of work that I do. You've seen politics story on TV, usually involve people around the Westminster. How do I get rid of that? Anyway, anybody recognize somebody in this photo? The lady? Perhaps? Yes, okay. Politics stories always have lots and lots of meetings that we cover. Again, we don't sit in the meeting. We ask the ministers, we ask the businessmen later on what was discussed. Business stories always make the news. I will explain earlier why we're doing all these stories. I also cover stories outside the UK. That was a summit in Russia, stories in Milan, business report in Milan, and also human interest stories. It's always interesting. It's not a planned thing, as you know. It's not directed, it's not scripted, but when things happen, like terror attack, big fire, big accident, you just have to go out there and cover. And that was during Westminster attack. Human interest stories always interesting because you tell the story in different way and it touches people in different way as well. This particular story is about the campaign for people around the world that was outside UNHCR building to help the refugees, the Rohingya refugees in Myanmar. And I went to Bangladesh too to cover the story of the refugees that been, the exodus of the refugees from Myanmar to Bangladesh. Okay, what is news? Earlier I was speaking to some of your lecturers who we were discussing, we were talking about what makes the news. Sometimes you watch on TV and you think, why is that important? Why are they telling that story? Sometimes, for example, we were talking about the earthquakes that happened in Indonesia. Why does it concern us? Why does it concern people in the UK? A couple of things, it's human interest. You find out about what happened, to the other people on the other side of the world. But we also want to know, when you see the BBC report, the ITN report, what they always mention is if there's any casualties, if there are any victims involved, the British people. So that's part of the reason why that makes the news. The impact to the public. You can see every day we watch, we hear, we watch, we read stories about Brexit. And that is the impact to us. Maybe not as a student, but to the businesses. And when you go out, when you graduate, when you finish later on, when you work, it will also impact you. And then there's this unusual. Sometimes you read stories about the cloning of dogs, for example, or somebody who lives up to 150 years. Why does this person live to that age? Maybe what he eats, maybe how he exercises. So the unusual also makes the news. Personalities, we always want to read about the celebrities. We want to read about David Beckham with his Miami football soccer club. They will always make the news. Disasters make the news, and one of the topic I put out here is follow-up. Follow-up is, people seem to forget to follow up a story that they did a while ago. If you involve in the media later on, one particular topic that you do, always bear that in mind. Something might happen again later on, and that's when you have the edge, you have the advantage of doing that story again. When you look at this picture, you think, yes, okay, that was a celebration, and she is interviewing somebody. But because there is already a celebration, which I covered, that was an Eid celebration, but the story is actually about a disaster that happened back home. So the story is about, while people are having celebration, they're still concerned about what happened to their family, to their people back in Malaysia. There was a big flood that happened in Malaysia. So while I was in London celebrating with other fellow Malaysians, we do that. So in one story, sometimes you can tell you can have multiple angles, you can tell different aspect of it. To link back to what I said earlier, the audience, why, when you write the story here, if you write the story for the student newspaper, for example, your audience will be the student. You don't need to tell a bigger picture. You just have to tell the story that concern the students here. Triumph and disasters, if there is a success story for sports personalities, for example, of course you wanted to know about them. Sports stories that I cover, that's Formula 3. There's a crime story that went on and on for a few years. That was about somebody who kept a few women as slaves. Anybody remember reading about this a few years ago in London? And that was a hearing at the court in London. General election. Again, there's so many different parties. But for me to present to Malaysia, I chose the two main ones, which is a Labour and Conservative. And it's so difficult to get the leaders, to get Theresa May, to get Jeremy Corbyn. So I chose two candidates from Ealing as an example, so they can talk about the parties. Education, always nice to talk about success stories. It's a feel-good factor for the audience. Sports, again, always make the news because Cardiff and QPR are owned by Malaysians. So Malaysians wanted to know what happened to these two football clubs. Terror attack, again, it's whenever it happened around the world, you cover this, I cover this rather, because people are concerned. People are thinking, what is happening? How can you curb such atrociousness? You have seen these pictures, I'm sure, many times. And the impact of this story, you can continue writing about it in all sorts of angles, about the victims, about the building, about the fire brigade, about the services. There's so many aspects to write about this. This is when I mentioned earlier about follow-up stories. Follow-up stories, it's not scripted, it's not directed. You would know, maybe it happened, maybe it doesn't happen. Sometimes it happened from a long time ago. But because it's just a life stories, that's what makes it interesting. You can never script anything like this. In July 2014, I got a phone call from my editor in Malaysia saying that take the next flight to Ukraine because a Malaysian aircraft was shot down. So it wasn't easy. It was probably one of the hardest assignments that I had to do because nobody knows what to say, what to do, how to do it, why it happened. So it was also right in the middle of nowhere. It's as if, to drive will take 8 hours from Kiev, the capital, because it's in Donetsk. And that's also happened to be a war zone. That's why the plane was shot down. So instead of going with everybody in the van, in the car, nobody advised me, but I thought I'm going to go on a plane because I'm not going to go in the van with everybody for 8 hours. I'm going to go on a flight for 1 hour. So I went on the flight, sat down. There's only 5 people, and it's a 90-seat flight. You know why? Because everybody was afraid that the plane would be shot down. What choice do I have? I'm already there, just pray. Anyway, I arrived, and I went back with the other journalists in a van. I didn't want to go on a plane coming back again to Kiev. So that was the team that went to look for the aircraft, interviewing the police. And then the follow-up I meant was, by then they gathered all the debris from the aircraft and they put that in a military base in Holland. That was the year after, which was in March, and then later on they did a report and they put a reconstruction of the aircraft. So we knew, we sort of find out the findings of what happened. And that was a live report that I had to do from Rotterdam. It was only this, I couldn't do any live link, it was only on graphic, because this final report was given in Dutch. So by the time I had to do the live report, I have no idea what it entails. So I quickly find out what it is, and there's no time to do a live link. I could only do on the audio link. That's why I had to do just the graphic to talk about it. Another story. This girl was 13 when this is another follow-up story. This girl was 13 when I interviewed her because she was accepted into Oxford University. She was a genius. She could do math like anything. Her IQ was so high. So the whole world, not just Malaysia, she's half Malaysian, not just Malaysia or the UK, the whole world was writing about her. Anyway, 2 years on, unfortunately, she didn't finish her study. She ran away, she didn't like it. Maybe she was too young. Maybe it's too much to her. She got married, she ran away. So that was maybe when she's 15, 17. And then we didn't hear much about her until she's 30, and I found her last year and interviewed her. She has no degree, she's doing a part-time job, she's renting. So this prodigal child, this genius girl, didn't actually make it. But you know, when I mentioned earlier about triumph and disaster, sometimes you wanted to find out her story. So she was telling me the story about this. So from her age 13 to 30, it's not that I actually planned to see her, but you know, when opportunity happened, you grab that opportunity. And this story about meeting her in Liverpool really make it big in Malaysia. Now, I'm going through this really fast. If you want to stop me, please do. I get to travel, I get to do all sorts of stories. So these are all the rewards. You know, I get to go to interesting places, meet people, I have new skills. You know, you can't just be a journalist forever. You have to improve yourself. I started to do writing for the newspaper, writing for magazine, writing for newspaper in the UK, writing for magazine in the UK as well. I learned to do camera. I started to do documentaries because you wanted to branch out. Because by being a journalist, it does open up new opportunities for you. And you get connected as well. People invite you to places. I get to meet the Malaysian Prime Minister, I get to meet the British Prime Minister, the French Prime Minister, and attend the press conference. I do, you know, one-to-one interview. I was invited to go to Dubai to cover a business report. They could ask any other people, but they have seen my report and they wanted, you know, to give me the opportunity. I get to see famous people. You might recognize this man and this person too. And learn really different subjects. As you know, there's a student from Durham University, from Newcastle University, who is doing just amazing research. And I get to cover crime story in Stockholm, again, without realizing the whole language was in Swedish, but I did get a translator. And got to see the Queen and her son, and go to really event that you wouldn't think you were able to go. But again, the connection, because we were, Malaysia's buying A380 from Airbus, A380 aircraft from Airbus. So, like you, I'm doing my filming too. For London Fashion Week, for some events, not every event. And Cardiff Football Club, the owner was happy enough to invite me to the field and go around with him. So we managed to film in there. Okay, not all things are great, but still, I don't call it bad, I call it challenges. I always have to read the news, be alert rather. You know, you just can't read everything. I have to learn new subjects. I have to be concerned about the deadlines and time differences because Malaysia is 7 hours ahead or 8 hours ahead, depends on which season of the year. I have to do my own networking. Half the time I was telling my editor what's happening in the UK or Europe. They wouldn't know what happened here. They can tell me some things about visits, but when there is a disasters or when there is a big event that happened here, sometimes I know it and I was the one telling them. And there is no fixed working hours. Weekend, evening, birthdays, news doesn't know that. You just have to work around it. And as a correspondent, there is no big team. I have some intern, and I was just going to say, if anyone of you wanted to intern with me, I can't pay, but I can get you to really good places and meet some interesting people. So I work on my own, in a way. I have cameramen sometimes to help me, and I have editors in Malaysia that I deal with, but a lot of time it's just me. And there's a lot of waiting. There's a lot of waiting for people to finish their conference, finish their match, finish their meetings. And when there is a deadline, I have no time even to go to a cafe or Starbucks to find their internet. I just have to edit anywhere. I was only smiling to camera. I wasn't really that happy to be editing there. Yeah. And yes. Travel alone. Why travel alone? Cut costs on hotel, cut costs just only me. I use the local crew. Even if I go to Manchester, I use a cameraman there. If I go to France, I could use a cameraman there. But these days, I start to do my own camera too, because sometimes by the time you wait for them, sometimes you still have it, you have your camera with you, you're having dinner, you're having discussion, and they come up with something interesting, and you say, oh, can I record that? You have your camera in your bag already. So that's the advantage of it, rather than having to have a cameraman, because you can't always have a cameraman with you all the time. You know, weekends and evening, they all have doing their own thing as well. Or sometimes you get caught in the middle of conflict. Not that you want to, but that happened. I was in a hotel in Evian, in Switzerland, in France, border Switzerland. There was a big demonstration. The demonstration happened to be outside the hotel. And the police came in and said, nobody leaves. Absolutely nobody leaves the hotel because of security. But so how am I going to go and do my interview at the conference hall, when I wasn't allowed to leave the hotel? So like any of you, I'm sure all of you would do, you ring your editor saying, oh, I can't go, I can't leave the hotel. Nobody's allowed, all of us are here. So I don't know how I'm going to do this interview. You know what the editor say, like all editors do? Your story is number 2 on the lineup. Do they care? No, you have to, all they know is you have to get it. So I went to the police in my very basic French, saying to them, I really have to go. And he said, no, nobody leaves the hotel. But I really have to go. I really have my interview book, you know? And the editor's waiting for the story. And then the cameraman, who was already at the conference center, called me and said, where the hell are you? You know, why are you not here? So what do you do when you're desperate like this? This is so desperate. I said to the police, can I jump out from the back garden wall to the other side where there's no protest? And he said, you can jump out, but at your own risk, because it's 6 feet high, 6 feet, 7 feet high. And then he said, but I tell you what, I ring my other police guy, he'll wait for you and wait for you to jump down. So he did, because all I know is my editor said, your story is number 2 on the item. By the time I jumped down, the police called me, I ran to the conference center, did my interview. The editor rang me and said, oh, guess what? Your story is number 1 now. Because we couldn't get from the correspondent in America, because we put Geneva story up. Thank God for that. So yes, I got the story. And by the time I jumped out, ripped my shirt, my shoes, you know, nobody cares how you get the stories. All they know is they get the story. So, as I said earlier, I started to do other things because I find it, again, as a correspondent, you don't work every day. You pick and choose your story. You only do stories that matter, big stories in a way, because obviously there's a lot of story when you watch the news, it's about local stories. They do overseas stories every now and then. So I do different stories. I do documentaries. I join society. I'm with a charity that provide medical and humanitarian. We send UK doctors to refugee camps, for example. And I do workshops, I do talks like this. So those are the various things that I do too. I got invited to be a judge for reality presenters. And all everybody was concerned is that I don't ask the contestant really difficult questions. That was a photography book that I did. And this is my working tips. This is one thing I was going to tell you about understand victory and defeat. I don't get to cover everything. I don't get all the interviews I wanted. Not always successful. Sometimes I fail too. Sometimes the story didn't come out on time. Sometimes I didn't get the right person. But there is always this thing that you call damage control that you can do. There's also this thing that you must understand that, yes, you didn't get that number 1 person that you wanted, but you can do number 2. You can also do number 3 and 4 and send a package to your editor. And also, when you're so successful, you got one scoop, the next day, few days later, it's forgotten. You must start again. You cannot just base on that one victory and think, oh, I'm so good. No, move on. You are as good as your next story. You're not just based on that particular success scoop that you have. Of course, we're always on the lookout. Yes, I have. It is. It can't be positive all the time, but you keep telling yourself. I sometimes don't even. Tonight, this evening, I'm going to do filming at the British Museum. As of just earlier, before we start this, I still haven't got permission from the PR whether I'm allowed or not. You know, so sometimes you just have to. Hopefully you can. If you can't, maybe you can get access from their footage, but your footage not always the same as yours. So yeah, it's always the next step. You know, you're always working on the next story and next event. And highly disciplined. If your editor ring you at 4 o'clock in the morning, can say, take the next train to Paris. You cannot say, oh, but it's still 4 o'clock. No, you just say, okay, boss. So I book. I went to Eurostar. That was because there was a Paris attack. And when I booked, I went to the counter and said, which coach I'm sitting? And the lady was saying, don't worry, madam, 700 people cancelled. So nobody wants to go to Paris that day. So when at the carriage I was with Spanish TV, Reuters, Daily Mail, me, 4 of us. We were all looking at each other saying, what are we going to do? Where are we going to stay? What's going to happen? You know, we just gamble. And I will show you, I did show you earlier, oh, that's just my ending. I wanted to show you earlier, there's a picture at Arc de Triomphe in Paris. There were about 4 cars. Nobody leaves home. Everybody stay at home. That was when there was a bomb at the restaurant, at the football stadium, and at a concert hall. So anyway, I was more concerned about the camera, as you can see. I didn't really care about the cameraman, because I don't want the camera to be wet. I don't know why we're filming in the rain, but anyway, there you go. That's my slide for now. Anybody wants to ask any question?
Thanks very much. I'm sure there's lots of questions to come to you, but my number one, first I'd like to dive in and ask, you talked about the importance of networking, and I'm wondering, is it just a case of doing it all the time? You talked about being in that train with someone from Reuters and 2 other people. Do you exchange contact details? How do you build your network?
Oh, when I first arrived here in 1993, of course. Oh, I wanted to tell a story, but I was working in a news department in TV3 Malaysia, based in Kuala Lumpur. And I wanted to come and live in the UK, in London, and I said to them, would you like me to be your correspondent? And they said, oh, we've never done that. We don't know how it's going to work. And I said, you know, I'm going to get married, I'm going to get a work permit, and I should be fine. And they said, but we don't know this. So we sat down and write down what I should do and what they're going to, you know, so we said we're going to do a contract of 2 years. So that's what I told my mom. 25 years later, I'm still here. And she was like, really? So what, you know, how are you going to do it? You're going to, I said, you know, it's a room in my house, be in my office. And, you know, it all sounds well. And TV3 said, we pay you when you work. We're going to pay you salary, but then again, sometimes there's no story that fits. You don't want to do story. You have to have a substance. You don't want to do for the sake of doing it. It has to be something good. So I get paid when I work. So I have to look for stories as well as they telling me what to do. So when I arrive in London, nobody knows me and I don't know anyone, obviously. So the network from beginning was I started to go to all the embassies, Malaysian embassies, student department, tourism office. I joined London Correspondence Service Association. I joined Foreign Press Society. I just joined so many clubs, British Malaysian Society. I joined so many things so that I get invited to the event and I can network even if it's a tennis club, even with a business club, that's when you get to know people. But you don't have to know everybody. You know some people, and then you pick, you say, oh, Alan is good because he knows this, and but you also have to be sincere in a way. You don't really friends with them because you wanted some benefit. You must, it will show how you make friends with, you network with these people. So constantly, and this networking, in the end, people invite me to be the committee member for British Malaysian Society. People invited me, I'm now the chairperson for the charity, which is Mercy Malaysia UK. I mentioned earlier about we send doctors and medical aid and humanitarian aid. We also work with some hospitals in the UK. And in a couple of weeks, we are doing a fundraising tea at the House of Lords because I met the Lord, one of the Lords earlier in the year, and he sort of sponsored his name for us to do event there. So how, not financially.
And each time you give them a card?
In a way, yes. Or their PA card. Or you contact them later on. Or you also must do something for them. You invite them to your event, for example.
So there's a number of different ways. You
Yeah.
can have a card with you because it saves them writing it down, or you can get their card and then follow up and invite them to something afterwards. That's excellent. So what other questions do we have from our journalistic students at the very least?
What do I do?
Questions? Chapa, where are you? Surely you've got a question.
Yes, I do have a question. I always wonder about this, how important writing is to be a successful journalist.
How important?
In your journey, how important was it for you to be a good writer to excel in this field?
How important it is to be a good writer? When I was a student at Cardiff University, I wrote for the student newspaper. I wrote about the books that I read. Then there's no internet, so we get books and we review, book review. I have a column about this big. I write about the film that I watched, about the sports awards, all happening at the university, and it's only published for the student at the student union for the students. So that was the beginning, Of course, in the beginning, you don't expect people to just know what to write. But the rule of thumb that I always do, even until today, if I write a story, before I submit, I look at it and say, who is it? Have I got the name? Yes. Is it correct spelling? Is it the job title? Who, where, what, when, why, how? That whole thing still applies. Because if you don't give all that information, how is your audience going to connect? And also, you have to tailor it in a way. But if you report, for example, you're reporting about you listened to this talk now. People would want to know, who is she? Why is she giving the talk? And who organizes it? And, at the end of story, you would say, the next media talk would be somebody else. So fill in with a lot of information. So the idea how to write well is you have enough information, not too much, not too detailed. There is this rule that we learned when we were training about a triangle like this. So the information on the top is very important. As you go at the bottom, it doesn't matter anymore. But sometimes people do important thing at the top, we change it now, and at the bottom you repeat again. At the bottom, you say the next person is going to present, coming here to give a talk is somebody else. So that make people have more interest as well in your story. So there are various ways, but as long as you put enough information to the right people. If you to write about this talk to, say, The Guardian, why does it matter to them? You must think who you're writing for. So even if it's a small column or a big column, there's a lot of thought into it. People say to me, your story is only 3 minutes. What else do you do in a week? They forget that all this research and networking and connecting and trying to get interviewed, trying to get permission takes time too.
Okay, any more questions? Phil, did you have something on the tip of your tongue there?
Did I have something to ask? I did until you asked it. You chased after my mind.
Chastity.
Yeah, I think what I was interested in is how you make the stories relevant to people back in Malaysia. how do you make a story well? And some of the stories I can understand they're Malaysians that you're covering, so it's obvious. But there must be a lot of stories. How do you make, they may be important for a British audience, but how do you make them relevant to
Some of the stories, for example, the Grenfell Tower fire, it is such a big story that people are concerned. How, it is human interest. People are touched with disasters. Excuse me. People are touched with stories like that. So that's why.
Smoke in the room. We'll cut for an ad break.
Yeah. So that's why it's important. I don't know what happened there. But I do pick and choose some of the stories,
Hashim has just reminded me that I always forget to bring a little bottle of water to my speakers. So
Excuse me.
that's all right.
So bad, yeah.
Jessica, did you want to follow up with a question, I think?
And sorry, I'm just going to add.
Yeah.
And also, even after 25 years, even after so many years, I still talk to the editors and my colleagues there, and I said, you still ask question how to tailor it to Malaysia. There was a protest at Trafalgar Square by only 150 Malaysian people about the government. So I rang my editor, do you want me to cover this? How do I do this? Do I interview the leader? Do I do this? So again, sometimes I cannot see how to link it. I still ask them. There was a big conference it's a big Islamic finance conference. And at first you think, okay, but Malaysia is very big. And I found out that one speaker is Malaysian, so that's why I went. So you need to research as well, because sometimes it's not obvious in the flyer, in the advert. So yes, a lot of things are connected, but big international stories, big stories that have impact on people. Brexit, for example, we still have Malaysians doing businesses to UK and Europe, but now we're doing a trade agreement with different each country in Europe, not via the UK anymore. So somehow that impact people in Asia too.
Finding that personal connection between your readers and the story.
Yeah.
Chastity,
Yes.
you had a question.
You said that your career is very demanding on you, so my question is, how do you find a work-life balance? Has that been hard for you?
Sometimes there is no balance. Sometimes I work till 3 in the morning, because 3 in the morning in Malaysia is 10 o'clock in the morning. They wanted it for 12 o'clock news, for example. So unfortunately or fortunately, I work towards the deadline, towards what the editor says. But having said that, yes, you can adjust, because some days I work 4 days straight, and then you have free time. So that's the balance like that. The balance probably not on that particular day, but the balance later on in the week. When I was in Paris for the terror attack, we were filming, and we heard the police sirens going, literally everybody was running away. And they said there was another bomb. So we ran and ran as well, my friend and I. And this restaurant opened the door and said, come in. So everybody's hiding at the back, everybody's hiding in the base, in the lower. Everybody was scared because they said there is. So my friend said, are you going to ring your husband? And I look at my phone, I said, I have 20% battery. And I said, no, I'm saving it to ring my editor. They said, you are so bad. I said, no, my editor will save me. My editor will ring some people from the embassy. He will get it out there. And, because not that I don't respect my husband, but when you have to make that decision and when you have 20% battery, who is it, And also, at least I could tell him, I cannot send the piece because I'm stuck in a basement. But anyway, it turned out to be a false alarm, but it was really bad, really scary. The whole city, that area, was deserted. So work-life balance, yes, you adjust yourself later on. I have missed birthday parties, I have missed gatherings, I have missed a lot of things, but there's not much you can do. You can make it up later, you know.
Do we
Yes.
have any questions from this?
We've got two more. Yeah, yeah. Hi.
You talked about picking up a lot of skills as journalists today. Do you actually have formal education, like camera work, or you kind of just pick it up as you go, informal education?
I sat down with my cameraman. In fact, I sat down with 3 different cameramen. Sometimes you learn tips from different people, and I learned how to do camera. But now camera is so easy in a way. It's small, but I do news, so it's okay for a few minutes. You know, if you do documentary, of course, you need other accessories with it. I learned how to do editing. You learn. You actually, the pick it up is good, but you might as well have a short course, learn it professionally. You know, I went to a talk 3 years ago, a BBC doing a talk. There's a club in London called the Frontline. They're all war correspondents, probably except me. But anyway, they do talks. They give talks to young, professional, new journalists. So I attended that talk, and somebody said to me, "Why did you do that? You're already a journalist." I learned new skills. They give you examples of what happened, and then you learn from the BBC correspondent, from Channel 4, from CNN. So you can still refresh, update yourself, even though you work for a long time, because otherwise you're stuck in the same way. I was telling Peter earlier when we, before the seminar, about new media. It is so difficult to compete with the people with Twitter, people with phone. As I was filming, somebody next to me filmed this runner, this racing driver one. But you know, I have to wait. I have to edit my story. I have to send it for the next bulletin. He already tweeted it, and it's already everywhere. They all know that this racing driver got first place. So how do I compete with that? You know, I try and do my package better, but that's another thing that you have to be quick. So now the TV station also put my story online, you know, but it's the speed. The speed is difficult to compete. That's why by having my own camera, by doing my own editing, I can be quick. I can just edit straight away rather than go home and go to the studio to edit. So.
Socrates, did you have a question still? You're okay. Anybody over this side? Ashley.
You mentioned that you pretty much all sorts of countries. So, how impactful is the language barrier, and how much does it affect your job?
Okay, language barrier. If I were to go to, when I went to Bosnia, for example, I requested a cameraman that could speak English. So that means he could help with the language. He could help with, say, driving around, reading the signboards. Language, of course, is very important. But a lot of my jobs in the UK, again in Europe, it is a problem when you're covering certain aspects such as court hearing, because they do in their own language. So I will engage, if I know in advance, I will engage somebody to help me, a translator, or a friend that could do that. Or I could write to the judge and say, can I have your translator's earphone as well? But yes, in Russia, for some reason, the cameraman that I booked who could speak English was ill. So I had a cameraman who couldn't speak English, and me, and a whole conference. But camera work, you know this, camera work is camera work. You kind of know the same style. So I had no choice. I grabbed one of the businessmen who could speak English. I said, can you tell my cameraman this, and this? So he did for me. He translated for me. That was desperate measures. Yeah, sometimes there's nothing you can do. You only know on the spot that that's not going to happen. You must have plan B. In Denmark, some international events said camera only. That means the cameraman goes and film. You know when you see all these ministers at the European shaking hand or big photos, it's only cameraman, no journalist. So the cameraman would go there. But how would he know which one is Malaysian Prime Minister that I wanted? He would focus maybe the French guy or the German. So I showed him a picture of the Malaysian Prime Minister. And he said, wow, I don't know you keep his photo in your phone. I said, because I know I'm not going to be there. So you anticipate beforehand certain things, but it's also based on our experience. You know, he will never know in a million years how the Malaysian Prime Minister look like. So languages is so important, but sometimes you can do plan B and plan C. You work around it.
Jennifer, you must be dying to know how you would find a cameraman if somebody asked you to go to Kazakhstan and do a story. How would you go about just getting a cameraman? Elisa?
Sometimes you ring a friend, sometimes you ring the embassy to ask them to put you in connection.
Embassy?
Yeah, here you make friends with the Kazakhstan embassy, for example. You say, can you give me the link, the name or the contact number of people who works in the TV station there? So you use the facility there. Yes, I have had that experience in Malta. And so you come a day earlier, you go to the TV station, you ask them to help you. But I got the number via the embassy.
Excellent.
So you make use of your contact, your network, you know, because in anything, there is a way to find out things through somebody, or even though hardly ever directly.
Okay, that's really useful. Are there any more questions?
That's one,
Yes.
yeah.
Sorry.
How much you get paid?
How much?
Okay. That is the most difficult question. Not enough. But then again, some stories, I get paid a fee, and I get my travel expenses, I claim later. Some stories are just going to London to do one interview, and then you can use some of your archive footages, send that story. Some story is going all the way to Ukraine and stuck in this field, you don't know who to ask. Some stories are difficult, some stories, but they pay the same. The reason is, it's difficult to quantify that going to war zone is more difficult than going to a Malaysian embassy in London. So to me, I win some, I lose some. You know, I would like to get paid more. In fact, you remind me, I'm going to write to my editor in December, can he renew my contract? Thank you.
I think we all agree that if we're sent to a war zone, we'd like to be paid a bit more than being sent to the Chelsea Flower Show.
Yes, yes. You got a question earlier. Sorry.
Little one. Do the embassies cooperate normally with reporters?
Sometimes. I have been, there was once I wrote a story for a newspaper, and the editor changed it, front page, really, really criticizing the Malaysian embassy in London. So the next day, the PA for the ambassador rang me and said, are you sitting down? If you're not, do now, because the ambassador is going to call you. He is not happy with your story. So I spoke to the ambassador and I said, do you know what? I can email you my version, which was not changed, slant in a way. And he said, it doesn't matter, the damage is done. So for 3 months, I wasn't invited to any event by the Malaysian embassy. Yeah, you can. But it's not my fault, but there's nothing I can do. I know we've got 4 minutes. Got 4 minutes video.
We should be actually finishing here, unfortunately,
Yeah,
but
that's
perhaps we might be able to add it onto the end of the lecture as recorded. But I'd like everybody to join me in thanking Elisa.
Thank you.
That these hills are going to be dangerous when the monsoon comes. What we've personally tried to do here
Ke yang ringkas, udara kering dan debu dari bukit yang telah banyak ditarah untuk dijadikan tapak rumah menyebabkan warga kem ini terutama kanak-kanak sering jatuh. Sejak Malaysia Airlines dan Lufthansa menghentikan perkhidmatan dari Frankfurt ke jika kami sendiri terharu melihat serpihan yang berkecai. Ini serangan dijalankan di atas Dewan Konsert Bataclan di belakang saya ini.
The crafts kept alive. It's even more interesting to me because
but you have to fight for the market share.
The investment, whether from abroad.
But tell me where there is no bureaucracy. There is bureaucracy everywhere.
Back in April 2009, Dr. Najib, when he first came in, said that this was...
These were dissatisfied.
No, smaller. Yeah.
Okay. Rolling.
Could cross the wall just for one day, of course. Other people from other countries, Charlie, on west side of Berlin. The blue area's west side.
Media pemotoran turut melaporkan isu perebutan. But I can't do this here. Memangkah kertas undi atau memilih calon kawasan. No, it's not. Wakil kawasan. STC mengakui selaku pemegang takhta ini, tugasan mereka It's okay. I think it's okay. Yeah. Done.